Welcome, everybody. The start is always just a little bit awkward because, as I have found, the video is not real clear when we start. So, welcome to the another May BJCP study group. Today we've got Erik Fowler from White Labs. We're still not ready quite to go live yet, but I need a little audience participation. You know, you've got to have a beer. But I need a little help, and I need to know how my audio sounds and looks, but more importantly, how does Erik sound and look? And Erik, if you don't mind saying a few things about
thank you guys all for joining us. Broadcasting today from beautiful San Diego. Been pretty rainy the last couple weeks, but this week's been pretty great. And I wish I could have turned the camera around so you'd see out the window and see the nice palm trees, but kind of blocked me out a little bit. So is everybody able to hear me okay?
So I need some people to type in the chat and just tell me Erik's video's okay, audio's okay. We want to make sure we don't have any echoes. All right, so it looks like Robert says everything looks good, sounds right on. Joseph says audio good at my end. Ralph says the same thing. Jane Price says looks great. Jeff Hart, yes, okay. Now, that's the important part. All right, lots of them. All right, so we got this much rolling. Erik, why don't you, I was at White Labs in Mills River day before yesterday, and that your facility there allowed us to use their culture room and do the webinar with Pat Fahey, with Ron Pattinson.
Yeah, I missed the Pat Fahey one too, so I got to catch up.
Well, that's what that was, is a subtle hint you need to do that. No, but it was so great. Joe Doyle there and Pablo Gomez helped us get all set up, and that was my first remote webinar, and I appreciate the hospitality of White Labs, but more importantly, I appreciate the hospitality of White Labs providing you the time to do this webinar.
Of course. Yeah, we've been doing a lot more webinars in the last couple months, and it's really a great way to connect with everybody especially from around the world. I see a lot of people are international calling in, so that's awesome. Timing can be a little tricky. I know sometimes when I'm doing them, Australia gets mad at me quite a bit because I like doing them early in the morning and ends up being 2, 3 in the morning their time, not working out too well. But, that's why recording this one's great.
Well, that's the beauty of these, and we're going through them, and the Q&A is the part that I love the most. I love the presentations, but the Q&A always kind of brings out some nuances that I overlook in the presentations. So for those of you want to get your question early, down there about in the center of the screen, hopefully I was pointing at it there, there is a Ask the Question field. So just a reminder to type in your questions there. If you look at the questions, you see one you like and you don't really want to write one, you can vote them up. And then that way, if we get tight on time, we'll actually know, we can get the more important questions answered. Erik, you've got a huge crowd. I'm looking at 137 people so far.
All right.
So, good job, guy.
I don't know if it's me as much as it's this, but happy to talk to everybody.
Well, we have the BJCP study group and then all the kind of ancillary groups that have joined us. We just have a really enthusiastic group that just loves to learn. So I appreciate your willingness to share. And nobody's really covered descriptor words, I think, to the extent that you're going to cover them.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope more importantly we can use it, like you said, as a Q&A to answer a lot of questions. I kind of want to take and get an idea of who we're all talking to here. So in the chat, if you guys want to list, if you're a home brewer, just to give me an idea of how many people actually brew, or maybe how many people are just looking to, get the certification and kind of be on the consumer judging side of things.
Well, I can give you a little idea of that. The poll that I put up for you is, what is your beer rank, if any? And 40% is none, 20% is BJCP recognized or certified server, And then we have about 35% BJC. Oops, that's climbing quickly. BJCP certified is taking the lead. It's like a horse race. None. It's okay. Right now, I would say it's split between none and BJCP certified. But the votes are pouring in, so we'll have to look at that again. But your question was homebrewers.
Yeah, I see a lot of people answering. And the reason I ask is because I saw a couple of the questions already were focused on yeast handling, which is great. And I'm happy to go into that as much as possible, too. For the context of this talk, I want to try to keep it applicable to judging and that aspect of things. So a lot of the answers and what I might give will be kind of tailored to how you'd use that in feedback and how that might apply from a judge. And then if anybody wants to continue to talk, feel free to reach out to me offline as well, and we can keep chatting about that stuff.
Perfect. Well, Erik, it is a little past the bottom of the hour, and I always like to actually kick things off. So if it's okay, we'll get this party rolling.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Welcome to the BJCP Study Group webinar. I'm your host, Doug Piper, and I really appreciate your allowing me to join you as we grow our beer skills together. I really appreciate your time. I'm a certified Cicerone and a certified BJCP judge, and I'm working on advanced ranks. And the beer study groups has turned out to be my way of sharing my journey and what I'm learning along the way. And I'm learning so much from all you guys. That is just fabulous. And people like Erik. And this week we've had Ron Pattinson. Oh my gosh! If you haven't seen yet, if you wanted to understand porter, he really puts it in its place. But today we've got Erik Fowler. Erik's been with White Labs since 2014, and before coming to White Labs, he worked at a prominent regional grocery, a nano brewery, several beer and wine focus outlets. He leads the staff there at White Labs with customer education classes on beverage science, history, and pairing. And Erik is no slouch. He has a Cicerone certification as well as a certificate in business of craft beer from San Diego State. So, Erik, we're going to jump into maybe a little bit about the presentation, but basically, as I see it, you're going to cover myths and realities when judging, clarity, flocculation, non-yeast sources, attenuation, flavors and aroma, positive flavors, but also off flavors, and then the ever popular question and answer.
Yeah.
So how do what do you think are some of the misunderstood things about descriptor words?
I think a lot of it is our limitation, our bias to what we've heard to specifically styles described at previously, and you see it a lot more on the consumer side, such as beer menus, right? The example I like to use a lot is, and this is usually when I'm training bar staff, you might go to a prominent beer bar brewery, and being San Diego or being America in general, you see a lot internationally, but specifically domestically here, IPAs reign king, and they might have 4 or 5 IPAs on. But you ask somebody what does that beer taste like? And it's more often than not going to be, it's citrusy or floral or piney. Okay, but how does that differentiate one beer from the 3 others that you're serving as well? Because these beers do have unique differences in characters, but we kind of fall into these traps a lot. And same gets applied, that logic gets applied when judging too. Sometimes my judging approach, which we can talk about more in the deck, is being a little more simple is better. Sometimes when you're too specific, it's hard for somebody to grasp what you're actually talking about. So that comes back to having a common vocabulary that everybody can pull from. There's a reason that certain off flavors, such as acetaldehyde, are described as green apple. I don't personally get green apple from it. I get a fresh cut pumpkin or squash. And I know when somebody says green apple because of that common vocabulary, what they're talking about, what they're referring to. So there's kind of multiple approaches to it, but I think having the discussion is a first good step, and then training yourself to want to further your descriptive vocabulary while remaining accurate is really the key.
Yeah, that'd be fun to write everybody to write in the chat what they think acetaldehyde smells like to them, because for me, it's like a lemony latex paint.
Yeah, I could see that, like varnishy. Yeah.
And the tough thing is it's one of those flavors that's hard to replicate without really having an actual off flavor kit. Mm-hmm. For me, anyway. So. Yeah. Anyway, what I want to do first before we jump into this presentation, because I'm about to dive into it if we're not careful. We're going to move into that in just a moment. There are a couple of quick housekeeping issues I want to cover before we move into it. First of all, this is not an official Beer Judge Certification Program webinar. So what the opinions that Erik and I express here are just our opinions, are not official BJCP approved commentary. If the webinar is not playing correctly, refreshing your browser will correct it almost every time. Also, if you can't hear, that will usually fix that, or double check that you have not muted. Remember, we've got the ask a question buttons. We have the polls. Would love to see people fill those out. And if you see me looking away from my screen, just remember it is a one-man show. And so while Erik is talking, I may be clicking on a lot of different things. This is part of a series of webinars that I'm creating to help the BJCP study groups that I'm a part of. And if you're not a member yet or are interested in exploring the journey of becoming or moving into advanced BJCP judging, search the Facebook groups for BJCP 101, 201, or we have a new Mead group. Answer all the membership questions. There are 3 questions with everyone. You will not be accepted if you do not answer all 3 questions. I have to disallow people already. We vet the group pretty good, so we don't have any trolls in there messing it up. Doesn't mean we don't have fun, but we want people that are at the right qualifications to be each one of the groups. The BJCP 101 group is for people that have not yet passed the online exam. 201 is you're beyond that. And Mead, we just need to know your experience level. Erik and I volunteer our time, like really everybody at the BJCP. But like everyone else, we have very real costs associated with these webinars. This is not a free platform. And so any support that you can offer is always appreciated. It helps me offset the direct expenses that I have. And we have several folks that have recently helped, and I appreciate that, along with some that have helped before. I've got Brent Dingus, Jane Price, Thomas. Sorry, Thomas, don't have the last name. You didn't include it. Jim Silverstein, Gina, same thing, no last name, and Ronnie T., and Merlinus Monroe, and Edward O'Neill. And guys, I thank you. It allows me to continue these and bring just awesome guests like Erik. Also, our huge crowds help that too. So thank you for everyone being here and participating. Everybody that registered will get an email with a link to the recording, the slides. You'll also have links to all the previous webinars and links to the 3 BJCP Facebook study groups. We also have another webinar coming up, and since we're about to move into the beer, I'll grab mine. Bob Hall is going to be talking to us next on oxidation. So I don't know if you've seen his information yet, but he's got some oxidation tricks where you can actually very quickly create oxidation, apparently in a Sierra Nevada torpedo. So that will be real interesting to do. I've got mine. I have not oxidized it by his method yet, but that'll be a lot of fun. So I would recommend you get 2. Get one that you oxidize and then get one that is untainted, so you can check the 2. So now that I'm holding up beer bottles, Erik, what do you think we move into the commercial calibration? That's always my favorite part.
Yeah, sounds great.
So everybody else that has one, a few folks have said the timing is not real good. That's the beauty of webinars, is whenever you get yours, you can pour it, check it out. Ooh, mine's a little bit skunky.
Yeah, it's 1:40 and I'm still at work, so it's a great time for a beer.
Well, I'm a little closer to beer time than you. It's 4:40 where I am. Ooh, I'm not sure if my glass is as clean as I would like it to be. That's a lot of bubbles. Ooh, you got a cool glass.
Yeah, it's usually my water glass.
That looks like some of the stuff I've seen from New Belgium.
So, thinking about this beer and the reason I chose it a little bit, obviously wanted to, Doug, you're getting a hard time about your glass.
Thank you, Mark.
Thinking about it this morning as I was driving into work, maybe that wasn't the best choice for something that expresses a lot of yeast character, right? Since we're going to be talking about a lot of fermentation derived character. But with that said, it's a great beer. And I was out in Arizona this weekend on the Colorado River, and it was 90 degrees, and I had a 6-pack of it. So I got through 5 and still had this one, and thought it would be a pretty good accessible beer for a lot of people to be able to have access to. But I'm going to hang on to it and then kind of walk through it a little bit. I have a slide on tasting, so I think it would be good to kind of review, what we think of it maybe during that.
Oh, okay. So do you want to wait till then and you'll go through the commercial cal?
Yeah, if that's good by everybody.
I think it's this part of it's your show. So, well, I would say if you're ready to do that, Erik, we can go ahead and just move into the formal part of the webinar if you're ready. You want to bring up your slides?
Yeah, how's that look?
Nothing yet. There we go. Looking great.
Cool. And you can see it when I switch and it looks good.
It looks awesome.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, I put together a couple slides to go through today. I think we have maybe 10 to 15, but really what I want to keep this as is more about more dialogue between everybody and really discuss what everybody's interested in. We put on a class probably quarterly called Building a Descriptive Vocabulary. So I took some of the content from there, and what that class is it's a tasting focus class for production brewers and front of house staff. So again, going back to that analogy before, a lot of the way we look at it in the BJCP scoring rubric and classification of styles is a great resource, not only for us and for homebrewers to look at, but for the industry as a whole. And a lot of the beers that we taste commercially probably stem from the idea of trying to fit within one of those categories. So what we'll do, like I said, in the next couple minutes is we're looking to form a better understanding of ways yeast and fermentation contribute not only to alcohol production, but more importantly, flavor and aroma. But we're also going to be looking at appearance, whether yeast is contributing to it or it's another process that might lead us to a hazy or clear beer. We'll kind of get into that. And then general mouthfeel as well. So, we talk quite a bit on yeast and fermentation when we're looking at beers that are put in front of us that we're judging as being primarily alcohol producers, but flavor and aroma and a lot of other tertiary aspects are affected by fermentation, by strain selection. I would argue that, aside from oxidation, most flawed beer, and especially most flawed beer that you're going to get in a homebrew competition, is really due to poor fermentation conditions. We'll talk about understanding fermentation attributes and really how to articulate feedback most efficiently when judging. And then just generally encouraging everybody to create a memory bank of words to describe what we see, smell, taste, and feel in beer. What I mean by feel is more of a texture, like what the mouthfeel is, what's the viscosity, what's the carbonation. Not so much, again, going back to this example of Sierra Nevada Summerfest. It's a beer I've been drinking for quite a number of years. And anytime I taste that beer, it reminds me of being on the Colorado River because summer's usually starting when it comes out. I'm starting to go out there. And it's a great emotional connection. But here we're going to be talking about, mouthfeel for the most part. So first, let's say, and Doug, I can't see the questions when I'm doing this. So if anybody has anything that wants, feel free to stop me and chime in. And again, let's keep it conversational. Otherwise, we can run through all these and then touch base at the end and go through what everybody has to.
I'll chime in if I see something. But I would say you run through your presentation. You're already up to 7.
Great.
At the end, so I think there'll be plenty of Q&A when you get done.
Awesome. So first, we're talking about yeast and fermentation, but what are we actually talking about? So really, primarily we're talking about the conversion of a carbohydrate to ethanol and CO2 when we're talking about an alcoholic fermentation. But more importantly, what else is being produced there, right? So we're looking at esters, which tend to be categorized as fruity, volatile compounds, acids, phenols, which we'll get into, and then a whole lot more. So there's a lot of complexity. There's a reason that you can't just take each ingredient separate and combine it and make a beer, right? So you can't take 7% ethanol and 3% residual sugar and maybe 50 IBUs worth of isoalpha acids, right? In theory, then obviously a lot of water. But in theory, that's really what beer is made of and comprised of. A lot of the beers that we have use very neutral yeast strains, right? So you don't see a whole lot of expression from that in a blatant sense, but you really do get a lot of complexity that you might not notice. And if that complexity wasn't there, beer producers would just be taking those ingredients, combining them, and turning around beer in a couple hours as opposed to a couple weeks. But really, to simplify what we're talking about, it is primarily booze, flavor, and aroma. So we get very detailed and involved. At the end of the day, it's pretty interesting and fun to take a step back and just realize, it is beer. That's why we're into it. It's something that we enjoy to share, and that's why we're all here talking about it. So the primary sugars in wort that we are dealing with, the primary fermentable sugars we're looking at would be maltose, making up the majority of fermentables, along with maltotriose and glucose. And so the way yeast is going to metabolize those sugars is essentially in the order of what's easiest for them to absorb and convert. So glucose just being one molecule, whereas maltose is 2 glucose and maltotriose is 3 glucose, are going to be taken up in that specific order. So the yeast that we work with for brewing beer are all very adept to dealing with maltose and some maltotriose. The sugars not only create CO2 and ethanol, as I said, but over 500 flavor and aroma compounds have been attributed to fermentation byproducts. And that's not even really talking about how those finished products, those finished byproducts are perceived in the company of other ingredients. We look at hazy IPAs is probably my favorite example because, while we might be a more educated bunch here today, the majority of people drinking hazy IPAs will open one up, especially if it's fresh, and be like, this is the hoppiest beer I've ever smelled before, not knowing that it's probably brewed with a very ester-forward strain. It's probably brewed with a yeast strain that's very expressive and has complementary notes to those hops. And a really good way of testing that out and seeing how much of that fruit is ester-derived and how much of it's from more volatile hop aromatics is to age the beer. Esters really won't diminish with time, whereas those hop compounds will degrade pretty quickly.
So, Eric,
yeah.
there not an abundance, at least in beer judging, of ester descriptors that we have.
Yes.
But are you saying there could be literally 500 different descriptors?
Yeah, not just for esters, but generally the esters that we're looking at for descriptors when judging are ones that are very easy to define and distinguish, such as isoamyl acetate, right? The banana bubblegum that you get in a Hefeweizen or some Belgian beers. That's a very easily distinguished ester, and it's in very specific styles, so it's important. It's worth noting. But we are able to run all of our beers here through a gas chromatograph, and you will see isoamyl acetate produced by strains like our English ale yeast. I've never picked up a beer produced with that strain and said, "Oh, there's banana there." But you look at it, and there is a very low number of parts per million that it is there. It's just below threshold generally, so it's contributing something. It's just not as definable. And I think when we're judging, it's important to not get too into the weeds with that stuff. I think it's important to know. I think it's fun, but I think it's most beneficial for the person receiving the feedback to not have crazy esters that nobody's really going to be able to quantify or verify if it's there or what's causing that. It also leaves us with a lot of room to be wrong as judges, and I think that's worth noting.
Thank you.
Yeah. But most importantly, the flavor production is going to vary from strain to strain. Fermentation conditions do affect the byproducts and the quantity of them. But the best way of determining so the example I'm going to use, because I saw somebody asked in the questions before we started this, and I would need to reread it, but I believe it was in the vein of being able to manipulate the fermentation conditions to get more or less esters, meaning raise the temperature, lower the temperature, maybe underpitch or overpitch. And that's definitely obtainable, but the best way of using that banana ester as an example again, the best way, if you want more banana in a beer, choose a yeast strain that's going to give a little bit more banana. Because changing variables is definitely doable, but the precision that you need to be consistent with it is very hard to achieve on a homebrew scale. All right, so now let's get into the beer that we're trying. So as I said, when we do a lot of professional training, using a BJCP score sheet is great. I say it was 10 years ago, joined Beer Advocate and started rating every beer I tried. And at the time, in order to check it off the list, you actually had to do a full description. And so I went through and started realizing that a lot of my descriptors were very similar. So I'd get a porter or a stout from different breweries, different ABV, different ingredients, and different freshness. And what I would see is I would fall into those traps of saying it's chocolatey and roasty. So it really helped force me to distinguish a little bit between them and dive into a little bit more the nuances of it. So again, going to Sierra Nevada Summerfest, I think this is a great beer. I think it's very clean and drinkable. Obviously in the Pilsner, Czech Pilsner-esque style. Has like a grassy lemongrass, noble-ish hop aroma. Maybe very faintly estery. Not really any alcohol present in the nose. So then, in the way that they suggest on that score sheet, in the way that most people walk through, it's really up to the individual. So my background before coming into beer was selling wine for a number of years. And The wine approach, I think, for the general consumer, I think wine drinkers really know how to taste, whereas beer drinkers aren't really trained to taste as much as drink. And last night I had a beer when I got home, and I couldn't really tell you what it is this morning. I could give you some general guidelines of what I think, the main descriptors were, whether it was bitter or malty, but I drank it, right? I got home from work. I didn't really pay attention to it. But I think in order to really expand a vocabulary and continue going down that road of learning more, you have to taste everything. And it's not saying you have to taste the entire beer. Maybe you just spend a minute and a half, 2 minutes going through it, jotting down quick notes on the score sheet. I know when we're actually filling these sheets out, you want to fill up every line for the most part if you're able to. But there's nothing to say that you can't just do 3 descriptors for each category. And so as well, I kind of skip around on the sheet. I always like looking at appearance, aroma, palate, and mouthfeel in that order, which is, I think, fairly similar, but I think I don't have it zoomed up, but I think they look at aroma first, whereas I really like looking at the beer. So looking at this beer, I don't really have the best background. On a black table, you probably can't see, but great clarity. It's kind of a golden, maybe golden straw, but definitely more leaning towards golden color. It's got a white head, medium retention, small consistent bubbles. So overall, a pretty stylistically accurate beer with definitely no faults. Carbonation's great. Medium low mouthfeel, good crispness. The flavor definitely follows the grassiness of the aroma, but you get a white bread or doughy quality from the malt that I think is great.
Yeah, Alex had a little bit of a write-up. He said lemon peel, lemongrass, lime pith, tomato leaves. Leaves. That's a new one on me.
Yeah, it is a new one, but that's an awesome descriptor, right? It's very vivid, and we all know what that smells like. It's probably one of my favorite smells is actually midsummer garden. Rubbing your hands on that when you pull something and you come inside to wash everything. Yeah, that's great.
Well, he's not done yet. Also basil, saltine, water cracker, acetaldehyde, and slight diacetyl.
Okay, I don't get any acetaldehyde or diacetyl on mine.
No, I don't either.
And mine was the 418. And I don't know how to tell by their batch code if it was brewed out here in California or Mills River.
Well, my understanding is from the people at Mills River, for the most part, they want to produce everything they can here. So,
yeah,
mine's 328. Mine's not as fresh as yours.
I'm sure it's great.
It is very nice. Good choice.
Yeah, it's tasty. It's a good afternoon beer. So I wanted to briefly touch on appearance. I've been using hazy beers as an example a lot lately because I think it touches on a lot of cool aspects of fermentation, strain selection, yeast impact. And it's something that's very popular, right? At the Great American Beer Festival, don't quote me on this, but I think last year it was the number one entered category. At least it was the biggest, quickest growing category, outpacing West Coast IPA, which is, something to say. And I think a lot of it's consumer driven. Brewers were hesitant for a long time, but there's a lot of great examples out there. So, I like showing this picture a lot, and this was actually sourced from Stone of a project that we helped them work on. But it's a good example because looking at a beer, it's very difficult to say where the haze comes from, unless it's chill haze, right? Chill haze being certain proteins when the beer is cold bonding, creating a hazy beer. And that dissipates. It's very unstable, creates a shorter shelf life because of that. Those reactions constantly happening. But we do distribute an enzyme that we call Clarity Firm that helps dissipate chill haze. But when it's not chill haze derived, it's difficult to say where the haze is from. So there could be a couple sources. It's most likely going to be protein derived in a commercial hazy beer, whereas home brews can be a little different because we can still have a lot of yeast in suspension. If you set the beer in the fridge and a couple days later you come back and it's a little bit more clear, you keg it a little bit early and then that crashes out in the keg. Those first couple pints are always kind of turbid, but when you get past that, you're left with a clear beer. So that really tells me that it's going to be yeast in suspension that was causing that haze. When it's malt derived, it's proteins from the malt, it's going to be a much more stable haze. Same with hop haze. But the Master Brewers Association put out a paper in the last 6 to 12 months, I believe, that took a couple of hazy beers and really distinguished what that haze came from. And they were able to see that most of it was, I'm going to, kind of ballpark here, but I think about 90% was from proteins in the malt and 10 or less percent was hop haze from very high hopping rates. So when you're commenting on haze, you just want to be careful on what you're saying that source of haze is from, especially if you're looking to give somebody feedback, because if you say there's a lot of yeast in suspension and it's protein haze, some of those processes that might remove one type of haze might not be appropriate for the other. So again, not knowing how people brew a lot of times, I think it's important to be accurate in the sense of what you're describing, but just be careful on feedback and maybe say, if it is caused by that, here are some things that you can do.
Erik, can you repeat what you said you used to kind of identify maybe yeast haze?
Yeah, so when judging, there's not really a way of determining, but if it is yeast haze, it's gonna that yeast is gonna flocculate out and drop out of suspension fairly quickly. So again, leaving a beer in the fridge, maybe it takes a week, maybe it takes a day, maybe it takes a month, but you will see eventually that beer clear up. Whereas it would be haze, it's going to take a lot longer.
It'd be tough in a competition though. If you're judging beer, they pour one, you hand it to there's in 10 minutes time, which is all you got to judge. You're not going to be able to distinguish between the two, will you?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, but I think it's worth understanding that it's difficult to judge because I've seen a lot of judges and a lot of feedback that's assuming, right? So those suggestions are great, but make sure that you label them as such because especially if somebody's a new brewer and maybe isn't sure, they're really going to latch on to what you say and take it with, being very serious about it. So being very encouraging, I think, is a great opportunity of using judging to, encourage people to brew better, but maybe look into some different processes that they haven't tried yet.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. And so this is kind of a cool example. So what we do here in San Diego, and then we do distribute the beers in Asheville as well. We have a 20-barrel brew house with 16 5-barrel fermenters. So for those of you that homebrew, that scale sounds very familiar, right? A lot of people will do a 5-gallon batch and split it into smaller fermenters, right? Whether it's 1-gallon Carlo Rossi jugs or maybe some 2.5-gallon, 3-gallon fermenters. And they'll pitch different yeast strains. You might try different dry hopping. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that. So we do that on a commercial scale, which is awesome, and teaches us a lot. So what you can see here is the same batch of IPA. So you can see it's a little bit darker. Where the picture is taken is not super ideal for looking at color, but it gives you an idea. And so what we have here is the same base IPA with 4 different yeast strains. We have our WLP-001 California Ale Yeast, WLP-008 East Coast Ale Yeast, WLP-066 London Fog, and WLP-095 Burlington Ale Yeast. What's cool, again, knowing that this is the same physical batch of wort, you've removed a lot of variables. So if it were protein haze, all these beers would be hazy. So knowing that it's the same batch of wort, you can say, well, yeast is the only variable, so it's going to show that these two strains were very low flocculant strains left in suspension, making it a hazy beer and changing the color of it as well, which is kind of cool. So I wanted to briefly touch on some of the compounds that you might hear quite a bit. When we're generally thinking about esters, or when we're generally thinking about, that's very poorly written. We're generally thinking about esters and phenols when we're thinking about yeast-derived flavors, right? So again, isoamyl acetate. A good way of noting if something is an ester is it's going to end with 8. And really what esters are going to be an alcohol and an acid combined, right? So you need a specific alcohol. In most cases, it's going to be a fusel or higher alcohol, and then different types.
Now, that was a good tip. Now, I'm an electrical engineer, so I skipped as much chemistry as I could. So I wanted to repeat that because there may be others. I didn't know that. So you're saying when it ends with ATE, that is an ester?
Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah, so some other examples, right? Ethyl hexanoate. It's going to be apple or aniseed. It's a very common ester, but you're not going to see it in very high quantities very often. I believe its threshold is fairly high, so you can still have a lot present and contributing, but it's going to be very difficult to specify. We talk about phenols, which are going to be much more strain and style specific. 4-VG or 4-vinyl glycol is that clove note that we see most prominently. You're going to see that in Hefeweizens and a lot of Belgian beers. Some other compounds that we more often consider off flavors, diacetyl, which is, probably the biggest, which, as you said, somebody said in the comments, it's going to be buttery, butterscotch, oily. When you see milky or yogurt, really what that's referring to is a lot of the organisms in yogurt actually produce a lot of diacetyl. A good way of seeing if, maybe training yourself in other foods would be to get a cup of Greek yogurt, leave it on your counter for an hour, and take this with a grain of salt. I don't want anybody getting sick and blaming me, but, let it warm up and it's going to start producing a little bit more of that. It's going to be more perceivable with the warmer temperatures. Open it up and you tend to smell a lot of diacetyl in those, which is kind of cool.
So, Erik, I've got to ask the question because I've seen it discussed almost with religious fervor. People that say they can perceive an oiliness to diacetyl in their mouth, or slickness, I guess is actually the word that's typically used. And others that say, no way, impossible in the levels that you have in most homebrew. What's your opinion?
Oh, yeah, you 100% can get a slickness of the palate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of a cool trick because I believe about 10% of the population is blind to diacetyl. And when you're doing sensory panel training, it's something that's really important to note people's threshold levels. And that's okay, but a lot of times those people that are blind might get the slickness, but not be able to smell or taste it.
Okay. Fortunately, I can pick that one up. There are others I don't, though.
Yeah. That compound's interesting, though, because if you get a Central Coast California Chardonnay, due to the malolactic fermentation, there's a lot of diacetyl, and that's a very desirable characteristic of some of those wines.
Okay. But the good trick and I didn't know this, so just leaving out the yogurt will create a diacetyl aroma.
Yeah, it's probably going to be very brand and yogurt specific, but I've perceived it in multiple brands. So
all right, so is that regular yogurt or Greek yogurt?
I've tried both. I eat a lot of Chobani or Trader Joe's yogurt, so.
And I guess preferably it would be flavorless, so you don't have the flavor compound.
Yeah, I mean, I eat a lot of the flavored ones, but I know what I'm looking for too. So, Yeah, give it a shot.
I've got to try that. Now that's a great, I mean, easy enough to do. Who doesn't have yogurt at home?
Exactly.
Okay.
Acetaldehyde, which we previously spoke about, bruised or green apples, squash-like, latex paint. Doug, you were saying that's kind of more in what you perceive.
Yeah.
Ethyl acetate. So, not all esters at all levels are pleasant. So ethyl acetate can be a nail polish, but at very low levels, it can actually be considered fruity. Butyric acid, which is terrible. If anybody smelled that before, I'm sorry. It says sick, but it's really baby vomit. I think it's kind of a polite way of saying that. But butyric acid's interesting because you can see low levels of butyric acid actually being converted to an ester called ethyl butyrate, which is beautiful. It's pineapple, tropical fruit. Again, all of these compounds possibly being a part of another aspect of metabolism. So there's a lot of complex aspects going on. Sulfur, which you're going to get in all fermentations, but you're specifically going to perceive it more in lager fermentations that aren't quite as vigorous, lower temperatures.
So Erik, I love your diacetyl derived or yogurt derived diacetyl. Mm-hmm. Acetaldehyde, as we were talking about earlier, seems to be one of those things you can really, if you want to smell and understand just the aroma from just acetaldehyde, you really have to have an all flavor kit. Is there another trick like you did with the yogurt idea on how to do your own homebrew acetaldehyde?
Not to me.
Yeah.
I mean, there are fun ways of doing it, but I've struggled with that one quite a bit, and due to a lot of training, which that training you need to really remain consistent and up to date on. I've gotten a lot better at it, but I'm very fortunate that I'm in a position where we have access to a lot of spikes and we do a lot of sensory panel training, whereas that stuff can be pretty expensive if you don't have regular access or don't have a big group to split it with. But using the actual compound, I think, is best. Another good way of maybe doing it would be to brew a really light beer and then try it really early into fermentation. And you'll have a lot of acetaldehyde present, but it's very difficult to then define that that's what you're perceiving, because you're going to have a lot of other negative flavors as well.
Well, one trick I did learn actually from White Labs, I participated in one of the distilling courses and yeast for distillers. Mm-hmm. And they did small flavors mixed in vodka. Yeah. And so I saved those. I actually had a little container. I brought them home, and I guess it's pretty stable for a long time. I've got an acetaldehyde sample in vodka that still has the acetaldehyde aroma.
That's interesting. My experience is that they tend to be pretty volatile and not hang out for that long. But with that said, we've done it in spirits a couple times for that class specifically. Yeah. But most of my experience is revolving around beer. Occasionally I know water, but
I know it's true in beer, and it was purely an accident, but I give White Labs all the credit. But I think this one's 6 months old, and I can pop it open and get it just in a minute. So
that's awesome. Then I have a couple examples of some of the beers that we've brewed. Data not always following with the way the beer is perceived. This is a pretty good example of some things that you would look at and how yeast would influence this beer. So we've got the same base wheat beer, and then we look at what determines a Hefeweizen between an American wheat. Really the yeast and yeast character, right? If you brewed this same grist, which I don't have off the top of my head, but let's say 50% wheat and 50% two-row, and you used a clean American ale strain, you're going to have an American wheat beer, right? Generally in that category. But in order to make it a Hefeweizen, you have to use the appropriate yeast strain and have the right yeast influence and character. So with these two, you can see we've got our 351 Bavarian Hef ale yeast and our 380 Hefeweizen 4 ale yeast. What's cool, though, is when you look at it, and this isn't a huge difference, but apologize that this is in Plato, not specific gravity. So what you can do is multiply this by 4. So we'd be looking at, let's say 10, 13 maybe for this. as a finishing gravity, and a little bit more for the 351. So they did finish a little bit different, right? So you're going to have a difference in correlating alcohol by volume, which is important. But more importantly, you're going to perceive other aspects differently because it's going to have dried the beer out more. What's most important here, though, is we were able to measure that ester, and threshold being, I believe, 0.5 to 1.5 ppm, depending on the taster. And so the Bavarian is a much more phenolic forward strain, is 1.8 ppm, so just over threshold, whereas the 380 is 2.7, so much more banana forward. Again, going back to, maybe when we're giving feedback, a lot of times we get very nitpicky or nitty gritty where it's like there should be more banana in this beer. So I'm going to say under pitch, maybe under aerate. Let's stress the yeast out a little bit. But that might not be the most ideal for that strain and might not produce desired results. So the best way of looking at it would be to choose a yeast strain that's going to produce more of that compound and be more stylistically accurate. So you're good. So
the better way to express it is check your yeast strain that's more suitable for the beer style.
Completely. Yep.
Unless
there's very big, prominent off flavors, that's going to be different. If there's a lot of diacetyl or something, changing your yeast strain could very well help. But there's probably another process issue there that should be looked at.
But stressing the yeast is living dangerously.
Yeah, the example I use a lot, I did a workshop for breweries and planning a couple months ago. And there were a couple people that were open. Everybody was looking at nano breweries, so 3 barrels and below. And I did a panel with the yeast wrangler for New Belgium, Guy Stewart. And he's actually in the New Belgium out in Asheville.
Yeah, I met him.
So he was talking about how they've started manipulating their dissolved oxygen levels to increase and decrease esters. And so he was telling the group of 50 people looking to, start making things on a bigger scale, start looking at your dissolved oxygen levels, which is very important, don't get me wrong. But if you want to change your esters, look at your DO. And I kind of made him take a step back because I'm like, you're one of the largest, most recognized breweries in the world, and you've been using this yeast strain for over 20 years. So you're looking at these very, very small details, whereas somebody that doesn't have the time or resources to do that, and let alone to be as accurate enough as you guys are, it's a much better suggestion to say, let's find a yeast strain that might get you a little bit more esters, and then be a little bit more consistent and easier to work with.
Yeah, there's an easy way and there's a hard way is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and as homebrewers, we all like taking the hard way, so take it all with a grain of salt. Just another example. This one's probably a better one on perceived bitterness and how we can talk about bitterness when judging. So 2 different yeast strains, again, California ale yeast, East Coast ale yeast. The finishing gravities are pretty different. Which the resulting ABV is very different, right? Almost 1%, which is huge. More importantly, the IBUs, so, these were measured a little bit different because the yeast strain does affect the isoalpha acid content a little bit. But let's assume that these were both 60. The perception of this bitterness is very different, though, on these beers. The East Coast Ale Yeast IPA had, about 30% higher residual sugar. So what's that going to do? When you have more residual sugar, you're perceiving that bitterness as less intense because that sugar is going to balance it. If you think about cooking or cocktails as an example, you use bitters, but you also add some sort of sugar, whether it's like a vermouth or a simple syrup, that all kind of balances each other and comes into play. So, again, looking at perceived bitterness, it doesn't always equate to how many IBUs or what the hopping was like of that beer. So another creative suggestion could be, if you're looking to add or decrease bitterness, maybe find a yeast strain that attenuates a little bit different. Maybe change your mash temperature to help reflect that. And then you can keep IBUs the same, but the perceived bitterness is going to be a little bit different. With that attenuation, you're also looking at a change in mouthfeel. So, the attenuation is the percentage of sugars that yeast convert. It's going to vary between strain, fermentation conditions, and gravity. And some of those dextrins are actually going to be a large contribution to mouthfeel. So something else to keep in mind. Oh, here we go. Some other considerations are going to be carbonation and adjuncts and how that might affect mouthfeel. Some high carbonation is going to make you perceive the beer as thinner. If you've ever had flat Coca-Cola, it's very sweet and very viscous. But when you have a high amount of CO2, which I believe they're probably at about 4 volumes of CO2, so more like a Belgian beer, it's pretty thirst quenching. And that really cuts a lot of the sweetness and viscosity of it. So again, knowing that all these ingredients play interchangeably to each other, and not just, changing one aspect, because if you change one, you need to understand how it's going to affect everything else. So we've got a couple minutes for Q&A, but just to conclude everything, understanding these attributes and the way fermentation interacts with beer can help increase our vocabulary around yeast and fermentation, which will increase our accuracy and quality of judging feedback. Be as accurate as possible and beware of blind leading the blind. So that's not really something I touched on, but what I mean by that is when you're judging with a partner, and I fall guilty of this a lot too, when somebody suggests something before you've gone through it all of a sudden you start looking for it. If you see somebody make a face, or you both get the beer in front of you and you start filling it out, and your partner goes, "Oh man," first thing you're going to do is, what's wrong with that beer? What am I looking for that's wrong? And that's going to influence and skew you quite a bit. So just be responsible and be as professional as possible when you are judging, and know that what you say is going to influence the people around you. And I think, when you get to the discussion portion, that's where it's great to see your accuracy and how you guys are working together. But just be mindful of that first impression, because it's going to make a pretty big difference.
Well, Erik, that was phenomenal.
Great.
I appreciate that. Learned all kind of new tricks, which I really enjoy. I've got to go try the yogurt diacetyl thing this afternoon. I have some up there. I'm mixing a little honey. Do you think that changes things any?
Yeah, I'm sure it will, but you're all right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into the questions. But I know some of you may need to go. So we kind of set these up. I want people to feel free to jump off if they need to jump off. The webinar will be recorded. We will send links to everybody who registered. And one of the questions I know I'll get asked, Erik, is will you share your slides?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And
I've got about 10 minutes on my end too. So what we'll do is I'm going to get through as much as I can. And then I'll go on to the BJCP. I can go on both groups, so the 101 and 201 groups, and just reintroduce myself to everybody, and we can kind of keep a dialogue going there, and you guys will be able to see, to shoot me a private message if you want to. So,
okay, then we'll go with the ones that are voted the highest first and see what you can help us with. So the first one, how do you recommend creating flavor memories to match up with beer flavor descriptors?
Taking notes and taking it serious, I think, is the best way. Having discussions, but everybody learns differently, so that's kind of a difficult question. But I know from me and from experience I have training with other members of the industry is sitting in a circle, but again, taking it very serious and documenting things so you can reference it. Blind taste testing is great too, because that really alleviates the bias that you don't realize you have. And, you know, I attended a wine class a couple years ago where they put 2 glasses of Cabernet Sauvignon in front of everybody, said, go ahead and describe it, takes notes. And then the last one, say what you think is better. And the one that I said was better was Two-Buck Chuck or Charles Shaw from Trader Joe's. And what was interesting, and the reason I thought it was better is because I thought it was more stylistically accurate. So, you know, it's just you have an idea of certain descriptors or the way you think things are, but if you're able to go through things blind, I think it's really going to help encourage you, and kind of looking dumb every once in a while really helps you remember.
I'm real good at that.
Yeah, me too.
All right, we're going to move through these quickly. The next one voted up, the highest, is what better references for descriptor words and definitions are there? In other words, I know at one point the BJCP, and I keep begging them to see if we can work with it, but I haven't gotten anywhere yet. They have a vocabulary wiki that I think they created at some point. But until that becomes available, what do you use? Is there something better out there?
I would just start with the general flavor wheel. It's always fun to try a beer with a couple other people and have a flavor wheel in front of you. I know Draft Lab kind of came out with a new one. It's not so much a wheel as it's like a cool little bubble chart. But then describe things based off of that, so you develop a foundation. You can then kind of map out where everybody meets in the middle and maybe where your perceptions are an outlier, which will help with accuracy. To become more vivid, which is kind of a second question to that, I think looking at the way other people describe things is great. I really think it's beneficial to get into other beverages. You mentioned mead at first, but wine and spirits as well, and seeing the way people describe that, because there's a lot of terms that apply to beer, but we might not think of connecting them. And I think beer could use a little kick in the butt to be a little bit more descriptive and romantic in our descriptions in the way that spirits and wine are.
Well, I think if you're interested in advancing to national or master level, especially, vivid is one of the words I keep hearing used a lot. So that's awesome. Thank you. We'll jump into the next one. What is the most common mistake in regards of beer descriptors? This comes from Robert. Thanks, Robert.
I would just say being inaccurate. It's important to be vivid, but you want people to taste what you're describing. Again, looking at it from a consumer standpoint, if you go to a bar and it's really busy, somebody says, "Oh man, I've got this El Dorado hopped IPA, and it tastes like lemon and lemongrass," and that hop is very lemon forward. So this is great. But you go back and you get a different bartender and you say, "I want that lemon beer. I don't know anything about hops. I don't know anything about beer. It was a lemon beer. It was great." And that bartender says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any lemon beer on." And so that's not necessarily a mistake in the sense of what they're using to describe it. It's a mistake in consistency. So, I think just being accurate within a group that you're working with, which, when you're doing the tasting exam of for BJCP or Cicerone, you're going up against somebody who is actually judging you for accuracy against what they're perceiving. So,
yeah, we had Pat Fahey on earlier, and he was touching on that, so that was good.
Yeah, I'm going to rush to proctor a couple Cicerone tests. So,
I'm going to rush through these. What would be a good descriptor for yeast autolysis? Camillo M. Thank you, Camillo.
Yeah, meaty tends to be one of the bigger descriptors. If you want a good example of autolysis and what that tastes and smells like, buy a real bottle of champagne. And I don't mean champagne for, the Kobo $4 or $5 bottle that you drink on brunch on Sundays, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but spend couple bucks on a nice bottle of champagne that, will be aged on lees, is going to have a notable autolysis character, and that's what it's known for. Because, when I was first getting into this career, I was handed a couple glasses of champagnes, and man, it smells like beer. It smells like malt. Why does it smell like malt? Not knowing to myself, it wasn't malt I was perceiving. It was a bready kind of earthiness that I actually got from the yeast. So
Jerry says it's Marmite.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's essentially yeast, right? So
Erik's the bottom of the hour, and I respect your time. Do you need to run off? We have 7 more questions. Do you have 5 more minutes, or do you really need to run?
We can get through them.
Okay. We'll keep going quick then. The next one this is from Joseph. Often you hear recommendations to pitch a very healthy yeast starter for a given batch of wort to achieve a good lager or ale beer. When may underpitching a batch provide a better result in the production of esters? Belgian and British styles are examples of beers with appreciable esters.
Yeah, so it's very strain dependent. I can't say that pitching less or pitching more across the board is going to achieve one result or the other. Generally, though, pitching more is going to have less metabolites, and pitching less is going to have higher amounts of metabolites. But it works in both directions too. And a lot of the pitch rates that we currently have, when we're looking at 1 million cells per mil per degree Plato, are based off of lager pitch rates from the 70s. Now, as brewers and craft brewers, that pitch rate's gone up to 1.5 or 2 million cells per mil per degree Plato in lagers. And a lot of that's because we're looking to have as clean beer as possible. So, again, when you're looking to have a bigger ester profile, I would look at changing your yeast strain as opposed to manipulating the environment. But if you really get to know your yeast strain, which was the case of New Belgium, there are ways of manipulating that.
But it's living dangerously is what I keep hearing.
I mean, it's part of the fun too.
I like that.
Yeah, it's part of the fun, but it's hard to replicate, unless you're doing cell counts, which most people aren't. It's just difficult. It's difficult to be consistent. If you win an award with a beer, you want to have your processes consistent, as easy to repeat as possible.
All right, we're going to rush through these. How do you differentiate acetaldehyde from apple-like esters? Thank you, Stephen.
Acetaldehyde to me has more of that latex paint character. It's a little more off-putting.
Yeah, it's a little more bright and by bright, I guess I mean almost lemon citrusy. It's just a real
bright, sharp, that kind of
sharp, bright.
Yeah, tickles your nose a little different, as silly as that sounds.
Oh, apple is rather soothing, and it's definitely not soothing. And maybe that's the real answer. All right. 1 second. Got a bad click here. All right. What is the difference between traditional Kveik and commercially produced versions? And I probably pronounced that wrong.
Kveik is what
Kveik.
we say, but I've heard so many things.
Which you think is more right so we can learn?
Yeah, I'd say Kveik, and that's based off of we have an office in Copenhagen they do a lot of our R&D, and Tolles, who's based out of there, who actually sourced the Kveik strain that we just released. That's how he says it, and he's very involved. So
that's from Dennis. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, and we got a comment saying commercial ones are usually a single strain, where traditional is multiple strains, and in some cases bacteria and probably wild yeast. Yeah, I mean that's spot on. I can't say I've ever had a traditional Kveik. Most people using it now are doing American style beers with it, so I think there's probably a lot of differences. But they tend to be very clean strains, ferment fairly quick, and be semi-low in fusel alcohol production. So again, leaving a pretty clean beer. It's cool to see them used. It's cool to see how that trend's going and if it's going to keep up.
Yeah, I have not tried to brew one yet. I've got to do that. Next question. You were talking about small batch fermenters. Can you describe the vessel that you're using for these fermenters?
Yeah, here we've got 5-barrel Premier stainless conical fermenters. So just essentially like a brew pub fermenter.
Well, you mentioned something smaller than 5 gallons, though. I thought you said something like 2.5.
Oh, yeah, I meant more so for homebrewers. I think there are some like the big mouth ones that might be in the 3-gallon range. I can't say I've fermented or homebrewed in quite a while, but I used to just, get a thing of cider, a gallon cider, and then, do 3/4 gallons in it or put a bowl off on it or something.
Okay. We're getting real close to the end here. What do you recommend for a healthy fermenter except controlling the... okay, let me read this again.
No, I got it. Yeah, controlling temperature is huge, and that's where most homebrewers fault, and that's just, because of the logistics of it, having the right equipment. Not everybody's significant others is going to let them have a huge freezer or two, one fermenting fridge and one keezer to serve the beer. And yeah, temperature is going to be huge. Vitality, so just making sure your yeast is healthy, is going to be huge. So vitality and viability, making sure you have a lot of living yeast. Proper aeration is pretty key, but you can get away as long as you're not reusing the yeast. I'm just pitching a little bit more, which is going to change flavor production, but temperature is going to be the big one. So besides that, I would say O2 and viability and vitality.
Brian says he has a 52-gallon of APA Kevik Voss in the fermenter. That's a pretty serious batch.
Right on, yeah.
One last question and we're done. If fermenting a lager at room temperature or warmer than the standard lager temperatures, do you still need a lager cell count, or should you look at ale yeast counts? Oh, I like that question, Jimmy.
Yeah, there's two answers to this question. So the first would be if you're fermenting the entire time closer to room temperature, I would probably just pick an ale strain because a lager strain is going to put off some off flavors at that. I would just pick a very, very clean ale strain. We actually produce Charlie Papazian's Cry Havoc strain, which we're going to be relaunching with him at HomebrewCon this year. So that's kind of exciting, but that's a strain that does pretty well at lager and ale temperatures. So something like that would be cool. But the second fold to that question would be one technique for producing lagers with a lower initial cell count is to start the beer warm, closer to ale temperatures for the first 12 to 24 hours, and then lower it to lager temperatures.
Ooh, okay. I do a clone of New Belgium's 1554 basically that way, cool. and I really like it. Erik, is there a closing comment? I know you need to run, and then we'll wrap up the webinar, and you can hit the door.
All right, I'll get this last one, and then say goodbye. But how many times would you reuse one of your packs on a 5-gallon volume? I honestly would suggest not to reuse it unless you have the ability to properly store it in cell count, which is very difficult to do. I mean, it's not very difficult to do, but most homebrewers aren't going to have the ability to do it, right? And most of us aren't brewing often enough to, when we're storing yeast, really a week is pretty optimal. And it's not often that we're brewing something similar, using the same yeast within a week time frame. You can get away from that a little further. What I would do then is not take the whole slurry, but take some of it and create a starter with it, and make sure you get a lot of cell growth and a lot of new yeast. But as of just blindly taking a quantity of yeast and throwing it in another batch, I wouldn't suggest it, and it's really based off of my experiences of trying it and realizing that, I wasted a lot of time on a couple bucks. So, yeah. You
mentioned HomebrewCon. Are you going to be there?
I'm not. I'm going to actually be on family vacation in Michigan. So,
okay.
Well, are you going?
Yes, I'm going to be there. So look forward to see you and the rest of the tribe. So That'll be a lot of fun. Well, Erik, I know you need to go. Do you have a last word you want to offer on helping us with descriptors?
No, just have fun with it. Really branch out of what you're used to trying. Pick up beers that maybe you aren't as familiar with, and better yet, products that you're not familiar with. Like I said, try going through a BJCP rubric on a glass of wine. It'll really challenge you, and you'll find where your comfort zones are. Cool. Thank you guys for your kind words and hanging out.
All right. We'll let you go. I'll keep talking a minute as we wrap up, but we'll let you go.
Yeah, I'll catch up with you probably tomorrow when I'm back in the office.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Erik.
Right.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with Erik and myself. We really value your time. You're just are great guys, and it's phenomenal how many of you jumped on this webinar. I'm sorry for the short notice. There was some complications crowd for Erik. That is just essential for us to draw other guests, and we have more coming. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have Bob Hall on June the 3rd, and remember to get your torpedo. This isn't like a Sierra Nevada webinar, but Sierra Nevada is widely available, so that does make it easier for our audience. And he's got a neat oxidation experiment. So if you don't know Bob, also check out his AHA webinar, because this is going to be a part of it. But that's going to be a lot of fun. The following week on June the 7th, we have Jason Johnson. And Jason Johnson just has done some fantastic work. He had a podcast series. He's got a webinar series, which a lot of people really like, PowerPoint online YouTube series. So Jason's going to be on here primarily talking about the online exam. And I know a lot of you are well beyond that, but we need to have some material focused on our one-on-one group. And there's still things to learn. And Jason will still answer questions beyond one-on-one questions. So I hope you'll be there. So those 3 webinars, get your torpedo and start to oxidize it a little bit. Get 2 of them. Remember, you want a standard and then you want another one to go with it. The webinar is recorded, and it will be sent along with the slides that Jason mentioned. If there's any way you feel like you can support us here, they're direct out-of-pocket expenses, and I do appreciate those. And that helps me keep these going. So with that, I appreciate everybody coming. You are a great audience, and again, phenomenal showing. Thank you so much. In such a short time, that was just amazing. So bye-bye. Have a great day.